In a dark alien training room, the cubs stood still. Their eyes were glowing red. Fear filled the air. This was the predator stare. A stare so powerful that grown warriors froze in fear. Robots shut down. Guards stepped back. No one had ever resisted this stare. Then a human entered, smiled, and kissed their noses. And everything changed. The training room was dark and silent. Thick metal walls surrounded the space, built to hold creatures far more dangerous than any normal being. Dim red lights glowed from the ceiling, casting long shadows across the floor. In the center of the room stood the cubs. Small in size, but not in presence. Their eyes glowed red in the darkness, unblinking and cold. Their sharp teeth were visible even when their mouths were closed. They did not move. They did not breathe loudly. They only stared. This was the predator stare. It was not just a look. It was a weapon. A silent attack that reached into the mind of the enemy and crushed their will. Grown warriors had frozen under this stare. Trained soldiers had dropped their weapons. Even hardened commanders had felt fear crawl into their hearts when those glowing eyes locked onto them. The cubs were young, but the stare was already strong. Very strong. No species had ever smiled at this stare. Not once. Not ever. Until today. The cubs belonged to a powerful alien race. They were known as the Zarkan Cubs, future war leaders of the galaxy. From the moment they were born, they were trained to become killers and commanders. Love was not part of their world. Kindness was seen as weakness. Fear was their greatest tool. Every lesson they learned was about control, dominance, and power. They were taught that mercy leads to death, and emotion leads to failure. Humans, on the other hand, were considered the weakest species in the galaxy. Too emotional. Too soft. Too fragile. They avoided conflict when possible. They showed care even to enemies. Most races believed humans survived only because stronger species allowed them to exist. Humans were not feared. They were ignored. Inside the training room, the cubs were finishing their daily practice. One by one, they focused their stare on metal training robots placed in front of them. The air felt heavy as the stare locked in. The robots began to shake. Their systems failed. Lights flickered. Then, one by one, the robots shut down completely and collapsed to the floor. The cubs did not react. This was normal to them. Next came the guards. Fully armored alien guards stepped into the room. These were veterans. Fighters who had survived real battles. They had faced death many times. They were not supposed to fear children. The cubs turned their heads slowly and stared. The guards felt it instantly. Their steps slowed. Their hands tightened on their weapons. One guard took a step back without realizing it. Another swallowed hard. Sweat formed under their armor. None of them could hold eye contact for long. After a few seconds, the guards lowered their heads and stepped away. Fear filled the room. The cubs felt satisfaction. This was what they were made for. This was their purpose. Then something unexpected happened. The heavy door to the training room opened with a soft mechanical sound. The cubs turned toward the entrance, their eyes glowing brighter. A figure stepped inside. It was small. Weak. No armor. No weapon. Just a human caretaker. The guards stiffened. This was not supposed to happen. Humans were not meant to be here during training. The cubs focused their predator stare on him immediately. This was instinct. This was habit. The human stopped walking. He looked at the cubs, and he smiled. The cubs hesitated. That had never happened before. No one smiled at the predator stare. Fear was the only correct reaction. But the human did not run. He did not freeze. Slowly, calmly, he knelt down so he was at their eye level. His face showed no anger. No challenge. Only warmth. The guards were frozen now, but not from fear of the cubs. They were afraid of what would happen next. The human moved closer. The cubs expected screaming. They expected begging. They expected fear. Instead, the human gently reached out and kissed the first cub on the nose. The cub blinked. Why was the human not afraid? Why did the stare not work? For the first time since their birth, the cubs did not feel powerful. They felt something else. Something unfamiliar. Something they did not have a word for. The cubs blinked. The predator's stare failed. For the first time. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The silence after the kiss was heavy and dangerous. The training room no longer felt like a place of power. It felt fragile, as if something important had cracked. The cubs stood still, their red eyes no longer burning with fear force. The guards did not move. The human slowly stood up, unaware that he had just broken a tradition older than many stars. The cubs felt something twist inside them. It was not anger. Not fear. It was confusion. Their predator stare had always worked. Always. It was the one truth they trusted. Now that truth felt weak. One cub let out a low sound, not a roar, not a threat. It was closer to a question. The human tilted his head, as if listening, and smiled again. That smile made the guards uncomfortable. It made the cubs uneasy. The alarm sounded moments later. Red lights flashed across the facility. Heavy footsteps echoed in the halls. The doors slammed open as high-ranking officers rushed in. Behind them came members of the Zarkan Council, tall and armored, their faces hard like stone. They looked at the cubs. Then they looked at the human. The room filled with cold anger. One elder stepped forward. His voice was deep and sharp. He accused the human of corruption. He said the predator's stare was sacred. It was the foundation of Zarkan dominance. What the human did was not kindness. It was insult. It was weakness forced upon the future leaders of their race. The elders believed fear must be planted early, or it would never grow strong. The human did not shout. He did not defend himself with anger. He stood straight and listened. When allowed to speak, his voice was calm. He said the cubs were children, not weapons. He said fear creates monsters, but care creates leaders. The elders reacted with laughter and anger. To them, love was a lie humans told themselves to survive. The cubs watched everything. They did not understand the words, but they felt the tension. For the first time, they noticed the human's hands shaking slightly. Not from fear of death, but from worry for them. That feeling made the cubs restless. Something inside them resisted the elders' anger. The council decided the human would not be executed yet. Not because of mercy, but because they wanted proof. Proof that humans were weak. Proof that kindness had damaged the cubs. They announced a final test. The cubs would face a real fear trial. Not robots. Not guards. A living threat. If the cubs failed, the human would die in front of them. The human was taken away. As he walked out, he looked back once. He did not beg. He did not cry. He simply raised his hand slightly, a small human gesture of comfort. The cubs felt an ache they did not understand. Their eyes followed him until the door closed. That night, the cubs could not rest. They dreamed for the first time. In their dreams, the predator's stare did not cause fear. It caused silence. Respect. Stillness. They dreamed of standing tall while others lowered their heads, not in terror, but in trust. They woke up confused and restless, their instincts fighting something new growing inside them. The next cycle, the council prepared the fear trial. The arena was massive. Cold metal floors. High walls. Thousands of observers watched from above. At the center stood the cubs, small and alone. Across from them, behind a sealed gate, something moved. Something ancient. Something that had killed warriors older and stronger than the cubs. The elders watched closely. They wanted the cubs to fail. They wanted proof that the human had ruined them. The cubs felt fear for the first time. But mixed with it was something else. They remembered the kiss. The warmth. The calm. The strange safety they felt for a brief moment in the dark training room. Their predator stare activated again, but it felt different now. It was no longer sharp. It was focused. Controlled. High above, the human watched from a containment cell. He knew he could die today. Still, he placed his hand against the glass and whispered words the cubs could not hear. The gate began to open. And the galaxy held its breath. The gate opened slowly, metal grinding against metal. A deep sound echoed through the arena, low and threatening. The cubs stood close together, their small bodies tense. From the darkness behind the gate, something massive moved. Heavy footsteps shook the floor. A shape began to form, tall and wide, covered in thick armor-like skin. Its eyes burned yellow, filled with hunger and rage. This creature had a name spoken only in whispers. It was a war beast. A living weapon used to break armies. Across the arena, the elders of the Zarkan Council watched in silence. This was the test. This was where the truth would be proven. If the cubs screamed, if they ran, if fear controlled them, then the human would die. The elders were certain of the outcome. Love had softened the cubs. Kindness had poisoned them. Fear would expose the mistake. High above the arena, behind a transparent wall, the human stood alone in a containment cell. His hands rested against the glass. His face was pale, but his eyes were steady. He did not look at the elders. He looked only at the cubs. He felt guilt rise in his chest. If they failed, it would be because of him. Still, he whispered softly, words meant for comfort, not command. The war beast roared. The sound was powerful enough to make weaker species collapse in terror. Shockwaves rolled across the arena. Some observers flinched. Some turned away. The cubs felt fear hit them like a wave. Their hearts raced. Their instincts screamed at them to flee. This was real danger. This was death standing in front of them. For a moment, the predator stare did not activate. The elders noticed. Satisfaction spread across their faces. Then something changed. One cub took a slow breath. Another stepped forward, not in attack, but in balance. They remembered the human kneeling in front of them. They remembered the warmth. The calm. The lack of fear. They realized something important. Fear had never made them strong. Fear had only made others weak. Their eyes lifted. The predator stare returned. But it was different. It did not burn. It did not scream dominance. It was quiet. Deep. Heavy. The kind of presence that filled space without movement. The cubs stood tall, their small frames steady. Their eyes locked onto the war beast, not as prey, not as rivals, but as leaders. The war beast stopped. Its roar died in its throat. Its massive body froze mid-step. Confusion crossed its mind. It had faced fear before. It had crushed it. But this was not fear. This was control without threat. Authority without violence. The beast lowered its head slightly, muscles trembling. The arena fell silent. The elders leaned forward. This was impossible. The cubs did not advance. They did not attack. They simply held the stare. The air grew thick. Even the observers felt pressure, like standing before something greater than themselves. The predator stare had evolved. It no longer demanded fear. It demanded acknowledgement. Slowly, the war beast lowered itself to the ground. It bowed. Shock rippled through the arena. Gasps echoed from the stands. No creature had ever bowed to a Zarkan cub before. Not from fear. Not from force. The elders felt something cold crawl through their veins. This was not weakness. This was something far more dangerous. High above, the human felt tears fill his eyes. He did not understand alien biology or ancient traditions, but he understood this moment. The cubs were no longer children trained to terrify. They were leaders born to guide. The council tried to speak, to regain control, but their words felt small now. The cubs turned away from the war beast and looked upward. Their gaze met the humans through the glass. The predator's stare softened when it reached him. In its place was something close to recognition. The elders realized the truth too late. The human had not ruined the predator's stare. He had freed it. Fear had always been a shortcut. Love had taken longer, but it had gone deeper. The cubs were no longer bound by instinct alone. They were balanced. Calm. Unbreakable. The arena doors opened again. The war beast remained still, obedient, no longer a threat. The cubs walked past it without looking back. Their future was clear now. And so was the council's fear. Because for the first time in galactic history, predators had learned something humanity had always known. True power does not come from fear. It comes from control, connection, and choice. The arena stayed silent long after the cubs left the floor. No one spoke. No one moved. The war beast remained bowed, breathing slowly, as if afraid to break the moment. The elders of the Zarkan Council felt something they had not felt in centuries. It was not anger. It was not pride. It was doubt. The cubs were taken back to the inner chambers, but this time, no chains followed them. No guards rushed them forward. The hallways that once echoed with fear now felt different. Quiet. Respectful. The cubs walked calmly, their steps steady. They were no longer acting on instinct alone. Something inside them had settled into place. High above, the human was still locked in the containment cell. He waited. He did not know if he would be freed or executed. He only knew the cubs were alive. That was enough for him. When the door finally opened, he turned slowly, ready for anything. Two elders entered. They did not raise weapons. They did not shout. One of them lowered their head slightly. It was a small movement, but it carried great meaning. The human was confused. This had never happened before. Humans were not bowed to. Humans were ignored. The elder spoke. The voice was calm, stripped of anger. They said the council had judged too quickly. They admitted that fear alone had limits. The predator's stare had reached its peak long ago, and they had mistaken that peak for perfection. What the human had done was not corruption. It was evolution. The human was released. When he entered the cub's chamber, they turned toward him instantly. Their eyes no longer glowed red. They glowed softly, steady and clear. They did not activate the predator's stare. They did not need to. One cub stepped forward and gently pressed its head against the human's chest. The others followed. It was not dominance. It was connection. The elders watched from a distance, uneasy. The council gathered soon after. The galaxy watched through hidden feeds. This was no longer a private matter. The war beast incident had spread fear and wonder across many systems. The council announced a change. Training methods would be reviewed. Humans would no longer be labeled as weak. They would be studied. This decision did not come easily. Many elders resisted. They feared losing control. They feared becoming unnecessary. But the image of the war beast bowing would not leave their minds. Fear had failed where calm authority succeeded. That truth could not be buried. The cubs were brought before the council. This time, they were not ordered to stand still. They stood freely. When asked who they recognized as their guide, they turned as one and looked at the human. The hall stirred with whispers. The elders exchanged sharp looks. A human had never been chosen. The eldest council member rose slowly. His voice carried weight. He declared the human as Honor Father, a title never given outside their species. Not a commander. Not a ruler. A teacher. A reminder. The galaxy reacted with shock. Some species protested. Others watched carefully. Many feared what this change would bring. But something else spread too. Hope. If predators could learn restraint, if fear could be replaced with balance, then perhaps endless war was not the only path forward. Time passed. The cubs grew. They trained, but differently now. Fear was no longer the starting point. Control came first. Understanding came next. The predator stare became a symbol, not of terror, but of presence. When they used it, battles ended before they began. Enemies did not flee screaming. They stood still, unsure, and chose not to fight. The human aged. His hair turned gray. His steps slowed. But wherever he walked, he was followed by beings far larger and stronger than him. They listened when he spoke. They stopped when he raised his hand. He never carried a weapon. He never needed one. One day, during a final training session, the cubs, no longer cubs now, stood in a familiar room. The lights were dim, just like before. They practiced the predator stare once more. The air grew heavy. The power was there, refined and controlled. The human entered quietly. For a moment, the stare pointed toward him. Then it vanished. They smiled instead. The human laughed softly, shaking his head. He reached out and kissed one of them on the nose again, just as he had long ago. This time, no alarm sounded. No guards rushed in. No council protested. Because the galaxy had learned. Only humanity could walk into the darkest room, face the deadliest predators, and choose kindness without weakness. Only humanity could change fear into strength without breaking it. And only humanity could remind the universe that power without control is nothing at all. The story spread across the stars. It was told in war halls and quiet homes. It always ended the same way. With a simple truth. Humanity did not tame the predators. They taught them how to lead.